The Galactic Council had a rule. No species could fight back against them. For 1,000 years they ruled with fear, but today, they made a fatal mistake by finding one innocent human guilty of a crime he didn't commit. As Captain Elias Thorne stands in a cold glass cage, surrounded by thousands of shadow-like aliens waiting for his execution, he doesn't show fear, he shows a smile. While the High Judge lowers his gavel to end a life, he has no idea that he is actually ending his own empire. Across the stars, billions of humans have just turned on their screens to watch the trial, and in the dark corners of the solar system, the engines of a hidden fleet are screaming to life. The galaxy thinks they are watching the death of a man, but they are actually watching the birth of a monster. Stay tuned, because you are about to see what happens when you push the most dangerous species in the universe too far. The courtroom of the Galactic Council was a place of cold stone and purple lights. It was built to make anyone inside feel small. The ceiling was so high it was lost in shadow, and the air smelled like ozone and old metal. In the center of this giant room stood a small glass cage. Inside the cage was Captain Elias Thorne. Elias was a man in his late 40s. He wore a simple, faded blue flight suit. He was tired. His hair was messy and there was a bruise on his cheek from when the Zylari guards had grabbed him. But despite the bruises, his back was straight. He didn't look like a prisoner. He looked like a man watching a bad movie. High above him sat the High Judge of the Zylari. The judge was a terrifying creature. He had 4 eyes that glowed with a pale yellow light and skin that looked like wet gray stone. He sat on a floating throne, looking down at Elias with total disgust. To the judge, humans were nothing more than insects that had recently learned how to build basic rockets. Captain Elias Thorne of Earth, the judge's voice boomed. It was translated by a machine, sounding like gravel grinding together. You stand accused of the highest crime. You are charged with the destruction of the trade ship Golden Horizon. 3,000 innocent souls were lost. Do you deny this? Elias looked up. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. I deny it because it's a lie. Judge, you know it, and I know it. My ship was 3 light years away when that trade ship exploded. We were delivering medical supplies to a colony. Your own radar logs show that. The judge let out a sound that was meant to be a laugh. It sounded like a hiss. Radar logs can be changed. Human. We have 3 witnesses from the Zylari Navy who saw your ship fire the missiles. Are you saying our noble officers are liars? In the gallery, hundreds of different alien species watched. Some looked sad, but most looked afraid. They knew what was happening. The Zylari wanted the mining rights to the asteroid belts near Earth. They couldn't just take them without a reason, because even in space, there are rules. But if they could prove humans were pirates and murderers, they could declare war and cleanse the sector. I'm saying your officers are doing what they were told, Elias replied calmly. You needed a villain, and I was the closest human ship. You didn't care about the Golden Horizon. You probably blew it up yourself just to start this trial. A gasp went through the room. No one spoke to the Zylari that way. The High Judge's skin turned a dark shade of red, a sign of great anger. He slammed a heavy metal staff against the floor. Silence. You are a primitive creature from a primitive world. You have no right to question the council. Your species was lucky we even allowed you to leave your tiny blue planet. We gave you technology. We gave you a seat at the back of the room. And this is how you pay us, with murder. Elias took a step closer to the glass of his cage. You didn't give us anything. We traded for it. We worked for it. And we've played by your rules for 50 years. We've been the nice new neighbors. We smiled when you insulted us. We stepped aside when your ships cut us off in the docking lanes. We thought if we were good citizens, you'd leave us in peace. The judge leaned forward, his yellow eyes narrowing. Peace is for the strong, human. The weak only exist to serve. By finding you guilty today, we are teaching your planet its place. After your execution, Earth will be placed under protection. We will take your mines, we will take your factories, and your people will work to pay off the debt of your crimes. Is that what this is? Elias asked. A robbery. It is justice, the judge sneered. We have the evidence. We have the witnesses, and we have the power. You have nothing. No one is coming to save you, Captain. Your Earth government sent a message an hour ago. They said they regret your actions and will not interfere. The judge lied. Elias knew the judge was lying. The human government wouldn't just give up, but the Zylari had blocked all outgoing and incoming messages. They wanted Elias to feel completely alone. They wanted the audience to see a broken human, but Elias wasn't broken. He reached up and touched a small silver ring on his finger. It looked like a piece of junk, but it was a piece of high-level Earth engineering. It was a transmitter. Everything being said in this room, the judge's threats, the admissions of greed, the fake evidence was being streamed, not to the council, but to every screen on Earth and every human ship in the galaxy. You think we are weak because we are kind, Elias said softly. You think because we haven't started a war in 50 years, we've forgotten how. You think that because we are small, we are afraid. The judge stood up. He was 10 feet tall and looked like a monster from a nightmare. I don't think you are weak, human. I know you are. Look at you. You are one man in a cage. In a few moments I will press a button, and the air in that cage will vanish. You will die gasping for breath while the galaxy watches. That is the fate of humanity. Elias smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. You keep saying the galaxy is watching. You're right, but you're looking at the wrong cameras. The judge paused. What does that mean? It means, Elias said, looking directly into the hidden camera on his ring, that I am not the one in trouble here. I'm just the bait. You wanted to find one human guilty. Fine, you found me. But in doing that, you just broke the treaty that kept us quiet. You just told 8 billion humans that being nice doesn't work anymore. The judge turned to his guards. End this. Empty the cage. Execute him now. The guards rushed to the control panel, but before they could touch it, the lights in the giant courtroom flickered. The purple glow turned into a harsh, flashing red. A deep, vibrating hum started to shake the floor. It wasn't coming from the courtroom. It was coming from the sky outside. What is that? The judge demanded, his voice shaking for the first time. What is that noise? Elias leaned back against the glass of his cage and closed his eyes. That, he said, is the sound of 1,000 years of human anger waking up. You found me guilty, Judge. Now you have to deal with the rest of us. Suddenly, the massive doors of the courtroom began to buckle inward, as if a giant hand was crushing them. The trial was over. The war had begun. The courtroom was shaking, but the expected explosion didn't happen. Instead, a heavy, suffocating silence followed the deep hum. The high judge stared at the buckled doors, his 4 eyes twitching in confusion. On the large viewing screens that surrounded the room, screens that usually showed the Zylari flags, something new appeared. It was a simple map of the galaxy. Thousands of white dots represented the Zylari Empire's territory. Suddenly, one by one, the dots began to blink and turn a deep blood. Report. The judge screamed at his advisors. What is happening to our scanners? Why is the network failing? A small, thin alien with trembling hands looked up from a computer terminal. Sir, it's not just the network, it's the ships. Our long-range sensors are detecting thousands of code signatures exiting warp space near every one of our military outposts. We didn't see them coming because they weren't using engines. They were drifting. The Zylari had always believed that humans were loud. Human ships were usually old, bulky, and leaked radiation like a sieve, but the humans had been hiding a secret. For 50 years, while they pretended to be simple traders, they had been perfecting cold sleep technology and silent drive engines. They hadn't been building better versions of alien tech. They had been building something entirely different. In the glass cage, Elias Thorne sat down on the floor. He looked relaxed. You see, Judge, Elias said, his voice echoing in the quiet room, humanity is very good at pretending. We've had a lot of practice. On our home planet, we spent centuries trying to hide from each other. We learned that the most dangerous hunter isn't the one that roars. It's the one that waits in the tall grass. The judge snarled, his gray skin turning a pale, sickly white. You think a few stealth ships can stop the Zylari Navy? We have dreadnoughts the size of cities. We have shields that can swallow suns. You have shields that stop plasma and lasers, Elias corrected him. You've spent 1,000 years fighting other aliens who use the same toys you do, but humans, we like to throw rocks. Very, very fast rocks. Outside the capital planet's atmosphere, the Zylari 4th Fleet was scrambled to intercept the intruders. The Zylari commanders laughed when they saw the human ships. They were small, jagged and painted matte black. They didn't have glowing energy cannons or shimmering shields. They looked like pieces of coal floating in the dark. Fire, the Zylari admiral commanded. Massive beams of purple light shot out from the Zylari ships, hitting the human vessels. But the beams didn't explode. They simply slid off the human hulls. The humans had covered their ships in a special material carbon nanotube armor designed to absorb and heat-sink energy weapons. Then the humans fired back. There were no bright lights. There were no pretty colors. There was only the sound of metal screaming. The human ships used railguns, massive magnets that launched solid tungsten slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. These rocks didn't care about energy shields. They passed right through them, punching clean holes through the Zylari dreadnoughts, coming out the other side, and continuing into deep space. Back in the courtroom, the judge watched in horror as his invincible fleet began to fall apart on the monitors. One of his largest ships simply snapped in half after being hit by a 3-ton metal spike traveling at 20,000 miles per second. This is impossible, the judge shrieked. This is primitive. This is barbaric. It's physics, Elias said, standing up. And we're just getting started. The chaos in the courtroom grew. The alien spectators were fleeing for the exits, but the doors were still jammed shut. The Zylari guards, once so proud in their golden armor, were now pointing their rifles at the ceiling, terrified of a ghost. Suddenly, the judge's private communicator chirped. It was a message from the Zylari High Command on the other side of the galaxy. The judge pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared. It was a Zylari general, his face covered in blue blood. They are everywhere, the general screamed. It's not just their military. The human civilians, the miners, the freighter captains, the janitors, they've all turned. They're using their mining lasers to cut our fuel lines. They're crashing their transport ships into our docking bays. They aren't afraid to die. Why aren't they afraid? Elias looked at the hologram. Because you threatened our home, he said. For a human, there is a big difference between a fight and a war. A fight is about ego. A war is about family. You told us you were going to take our planet and enslave our children. You didn't give us a choice. You made this a war of survival. And humans are the best survivors in the universe. The judge looked at Elias, then at the dying general in the hologram. He realized his mistake. He had treated humanity like a political problem to be solved with a fake trial. He hadn't realized he was poking a hornet's nest with a very short stick. The shaking returned, louder this time. The ceiling of the courtroom, the one lost in shadows, began to crack. Huge chunks of stone fell, crushing the judge's floating throne. Dust filled the air, making the aliens cough and gag. Through the dust, a new sound emerged. It was a rhythmic thumping thump-thump. It sounded like a heartbeat, but louder. It was the sound of boots. Thousands of boots hitting the ground in perfect unison. A hole opened in the roof, and a single human figure descended on a gravity wire. He wasn't wearing a flight suit like Elias. He was wearing ironclad power armor. He looked like a mechanical demon, glowing with a low green light. He landed right in front of Elias's cage and, with a single punch, shattered the reinforced glass into a million pieces. The soldier looked at the judge, then at Elias. He handed Elias a small, black pistol. "Sorry, we're late, Captain," the soldier said, his voice deep and filtered through a helmet. Traffic was a bit heavy around the moon. Elias took the gun and stepped out over the broken glass. He walked toward the judge, who was now crawling on the floor, his golden robes covered in dirt. "You said the weak only exists to serve," Elias reminded him, pointing the pistol at the judge's forehead. "But you forgot one thing. The weak outnumber you 1,000,000 to 1, and they're all wide awake now." The judge looked up, his yellow eyes wide with terror. What are you going to do to us?" Elias didn't pull the trigger. He looked at the camera on his ring, which was still streaming to the entire galaxy. "We're going to show you what real justice looks like," Elias said. "And then, we're going to make sure no one ever makes the mistake of finding a human guilty ever again, outside." The sky of the alien capital was no longer purple. It was covered in the black holes of human ships. The silent awakening was over. The loud part had begun. The dust in the courtroom began to settle, but the world outside was screaming. The high judge of the Zylari sat on the floor, his expensive robes torn and his crown missing. He looked up at Captain Elias Thorne and the armored soldier standing beside him. For the first time in his long life, the judge felt like the primitive one. "You can't do this," the judge whispered, his voice cracking. "We are the council. We are the law. If you destroy us, the galaxy will fall into chaos. Other races will fight. There will be no order." Elias looked at the soldier, who stepped forward and tapped a button on his wrist. A giant holographic map filled the center of the broken room. It wasn't a map of star systems anymore. It was a live feed of the Zylari capital city. The viewers on YouTube and across the galaxy saw something incredible. Human dropships weren't bombing the city. They were landing in the squares, the parks, and the transport hubs. Thousands of humans in power armor were stepping out. But they weren't shooting civilians. They were disarming the Zylari police and handing out food and medicine to the lower-class alien species that the Zylari had oppressed for centuries. "We aren't here to destroy the galaxy," Judge Elias said, looking down at him. "We're here to fire the management. You had 1,000 years to lead, and all you did was bully. Now it's our turn to show you how a real leader acts." Suddenly, the ground shook violently. A massive Zylari war machine, a tripod walker the size of a building, stomped toward the courtroom. It fired a beam of pure energy, melting a nearby human dropship. The judge saw this and started to laugh hysterically. "There, our heavy guard has arrived. You are trapped in this room. You may have your little rocks in space, but on the ground, our technology is supreme." The human soldier didn't flinch. He didn't even reach for his gun. He simply looked up at the hole in the ceiling and spoke into his helmet. "Target confirmed. Orbital strike needle drop. Fire when ready." A second later, a thin white line of light fell from the sky. It wasn't an explosion. It didn't make a sound. It was a solid pole of tungsten, dropped from a ship in orbit. It hit the Zylari walker directly in the center. The massive machine didn't explode. It simply crumpled like an aluminum can under a boot. The kinetic energy was so precise that the buildings 10 feet away weren't even scratched. The judge stopped laughing. His eyes went wide. How can you be so precise?" "Because we've been practicing," Elias said. "While you were building statues of yourself, we were building math. We didn't spend our money on gold thrones. We spent it on making sure we never miss." Elias turned back to the camera on his ring. "To the citizens of the galaxy, the Zylari Empire is over. Their fleets are disabled. Their leaders are under arrest. We aren't here to be your new masters. We don't want your planets, and we don't want your gold. We just want to go back to our ships and be left alone. But if anyone tries to frame a human again, or tries to threaten our home, remember what you saw today." The soldier grabbed the judge by his collar and stood him up. "Move it, Your Majesty. You have a new trial to attend. This time the jury isn't made of your friends. It's made of the people you've been stepping on." As Elias walked out of the ruined courtroom, he stepped into the sunlight of the alien world. The sky was filled with the roar of human engines. But as he looked around, he saw something that surprised even him. The alien citizens, the ones the Zylari had ruled with fear, weren't running away. They were coming out of their homes. They were watching the human soldiers with curiosity, not terror. A small, lizard-like child ran up to a human soldier and touched his shiny armor. The soldier reached into a pouch, pulled out a chocolate bar from Earth, and handed it to the child. The child took a bite. His eyes lighting up, he waved at the soldier. The soldier waved back. Elias smiled. This was the true strength of humanity. They could be the most terrifying monsters in the dark when they needed to be. But as soon as the fight was over, they were the first ones to offer a hand. They were a species of extremes, infinite kindness and infinite wrath. Hours later, Elias stood on the deck of the human flagship, the Terra Nova. He looked at the stars. The Zylari Empire had been dismantled in less than 24 hours. The invincible lords of the galaxy were now sitting in holding cells waiting for their own justice. A message appeared on his screen. It was from the Earth government. Captain Thorne, glad to have you back. The galaxy is quiet now. Everyone is very, very polite today. Elias chuckled. He knew that politeness wouldn't last forever. Someone else would eventually get greedy. Someone else would think they could bully the soft humans. But for now, the message had been sent. He looked at the ring on his finger. The stream was still going, with billions of comments flying by in 100 different languages. The most popular comment, translated from a dozen alien tongues, was the same: "Don't wake the humans." Elias leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He was finally going home. He had been a prisoner, a martyr, and a hero all in one day. But more importantly, he had shown the universe that humanity wasn't a species to be managed or conquered. Humanity was a fire. If you treated it with respect, it would keep you warm. If you tried to stomp it out, it would burn your entire world to ashes. The screen faded to black, leaving only the image of the Earth small blue, and more protected than it had ever been in history.